The Soviet Union was created in 1922, but its origins go back to 1917. Let us go back in time. When the Russian Empire joined World War I, it began to fight Germany and Austria-Hungary in the west and the Ottoman Empire in the south. Russia could not resist Germany, but it made some gains in Ottoman territory. However, in 1917, the Bolsheviks, a radical socialist faction led by Lenin, came to power and overthrew the reign of the Russian Tsar. On October 25, 1917, the Bolsheviks staged a coup in Petrograd, the capital of Russia, and forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate. The Bolsheviks then seized power and, considering that they opposed the war, they signed a peace treaty with Germany and its allies, giving up large parts of the former Russian Empire, including Finland, Poland, the Baltic states, Ukraine, and parts of the Caucasus. These regions declared their independence or formed new states, such as Georgia and Armenia. A total of 8 states became independent from Russia. A civil war ensued between the Bolsheviks, who controlled most of the central and eastern regions, and their opponents, who formed the White Movement and were supported by foreign powers. The Civil War lasted until 1921, but the Bolsheviks managed to defeat the Whites and consolidate their rule. On December 30, 1922, 4 Soviet republics, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Transcaucasia, united to form the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. The Soviet Union sought to expand its influence by supporting communist movements in other countries. However, Lenin became ill and wrote in his testament that Stalin, one of his closest associates, was not suitable for leading the Soviet Union and advised the party to remove him from power or limit his authority. Lenin died on January 21, 1924. After his death, a power struggle emerged between Stalin and Leon Trotsky, another prominent Bolshevik leader. Stalin eventually won the rivalry in 1927 and expelled Trotsky from the Soviet Union. In the first 5-year plan, which started in 1928, Stalin collectivized agriculture and industrialized the economy. In the second 5-year plan, which started in 1933, 4,500 factories were opened, and in the third 5-year plan, which started in 1938, 3,000 more factories were built. In 1939, Stalin signed a non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany, which surprised the world, given their opposing ideologies. The pact also divided Poland and the Baltic states between the Soviet Union and Germany. In 1941, Germany violated the pact and invaded the Soviet Union in an operation called Barbarossa. It was the largest and most ambitious military operation in history. The Soviets were not prepared for this operation, and they suffered huge losses and retreated at the beginning. But when Germany reached the outskirts of Moscow and Stalingrad, the Soviet resistance and the harsh winter slowed down the German advance and prevented them from capturing their main objectives: Moscow, the capital and largest city of the Soviet Union, and Stalingrad, a major industrial and strategic city on the Volga River. Germany failed to take Moscow, as the Soviet forces launched a counterattack and pushed them back. The Battle of Moscow lasted from October 1941 to January 1942 and resulted in a Soviet victory and a German retreat. Germany also faced fierce resistance from the Soviet defenders in Stalingrad, who fought for every building and street. The Soviet forces encircled and trapped the German army in the city and forced them to surrender. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted from August 1942 to February 1943 and became one of the bloodiest and most brutal battles in history. The battle also marked the first major defeat of the German army and the turning point of the war. The Soviet Union then liberated Eastern Europe and reached Berlin, the capital of Nazi Germany. Stalin ordered the assault on Berlin, and the war ended with the Soviet victory. After World War II, the Soviet Union established communist regimes in countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Albania, East Germany, Poland, and Czechoslovakia. The communists also won the Civil War in China, and Korea was divided into two parts: North Korea, which became communist, and South Korea, which was supported by the United States. With the fast expansion of communism, the USA and Western Europe became fearful. That's how NATO was created in 1949 as a military alliance against the Soviet threat. With the Fourth Five-Year Plan, the Soviet Union developed rapidly, but Stalin died in 1953. During his reign, he was able to modernize his country, but he was also very oppressive and caused the death of millions of people through purges, famines, and gulags. With the unexpected death of Stalin, a power struggle emerged among his successors. Then Khrushchev came to power and pursued a more peaceful and cooperative relationship with the Western powers. He also denounced Stalin's crimes and initiated a period of de-Stalinization. During his time, the Soviet Union became one of the most powerful economies in the world, and it achieved remarkable feats in science and technology, such as sending the first satellite and the first person to space. It also supported the Cuban Revolution and placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, which led to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the closest the world ever came to a nuclear war. However, the relations between Khrushchev and his party deteriorated because of his erratic and impulsive policies, and his failure to balance the needs of the domestic and foreign sectors of the economy. In 1964, Khrushchev was deposed from his responsibilities, and Brezhnev was assigned to lead the Soviet Union. Brezhnev developed the Soviet economy in some areas, such as a heavy industry, defense, and space exploration, and it remained one of the largest economies in the world, with a high percentage of educated people. However, the Soviet economy also suffered from stagnation, inefficiency, corruption, and shortages in other areas, such as agriculture, consumer goods and services, and it fell behind the Western economies in terms of innovation, productivity, and quality. In 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to prop up the communist government that was facing a rebellion by the Mujahideen, a group of Islamic guerrillas. The Soviet military intervention was a costly and unpopular war, which lasted for 10 years and drained the Soviet economy and morale. It also increased the opposition to Brezhnev, both at home and abroad. Brezhnev died on November 10, 1982. After Brezhnev's death, Yuri Andropov replaced him, but he died 2 years later in 1984. Then, Konstantin Chernenko became the leader, but he died after a year in 1985. The new president was Mikhail Gorbachev. He was the youngest and most reformist leader of the USSR. He introduced the policy of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, which aimed to democratize and modernize the country. He also improved relations with the West and ended the Cold War. However, his reforms also led to the rise of nationalism, economic crisis, and political instability, which eventually resulted in the dissolution of the USSR in 1991. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev announced his decision to step down as the president of the USSR in a televised speech. He also signed a decree that transferred the control of Soviet nuclear weapons to Russia, the largest and most powerful republic in the former Union. After his speech, the Soviet red flag over the Kremlin was lowered and replaced by the Russian tricolor flag. This signified the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the emergence of the Commonwealth of Independent States, a loose association of the 11 former Soviet republics.